The content of this podcast is based on medical fact and evidence-based practice from credible authoritative sources, but is not a substitute for your institution's policies, procedures, common sense, or good judgment. The views and opinions are those of Eric Bauer and FlightBridgeED in their entirety.
Hey everybody, welcome to the FlightBridgeED Podcast, where we're going to debrief just everything related to current events within nursing, HIMSS, and EMS. And we have a lot of great topics to talk about here with my lovely wife, Ashley Bauer, and my other lovely wife, man-wife, Evan Claunch. Is that correct, guys?
Does that offend you?
I'm not offended.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if I'm offended or not.
Well,
So how's everybody doing?
We're doing good.
good.
Yeah. We're gonna change things up. Obviously, we recorded a 3-part series. Evan and I did. Ashley was a little under the weather, and we've gotten great reviews on that. I think we want to try to put out more content. So this is a way for us to do that and really get a overview of everybody's perspective, right? And that, I think, that is what is great about a collaborative effort like this.
Yeah, I think so too. And we're calling this the debrief, and you know, a big part of that goes back to the air medical career that we all had at some point, where we sat down in the morning and we went out, like, we went over everything that we were going to do for the day. Like, let's talk about the issues that are out there. Let's talk about some of the dangers that we may see, and let's talk about what we want to accomplish. And so I think by debriefing from the industry as a whole, I think we all kind of come together and we can make our industry better. The HIMSS industry, air medical, the nursing, paramedic industry, EMS industry as a whole. So that's really why we wanted to do this.
What do you think?
Nice.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I was going to try to come up with something like clever, but I absolutely cannot outdo that. So
Why not?
I think let's just get to the first topic.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's a lot of good stuff out there. Obviously, we have ever-changing policy out there. We have, we've come from this post-COVID, if you want to call it that. Obviously, we still have a pretty big positive in the world, really, in the United States, this Omicron. But I think it definitely has shown that we have some weaknesses in our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's a new variant out, I think, maybe, that they're calling the stealth variant, that doesn't even show up. Lord. Have you heard about this? It doesn't even show up on tests now. Like, it's just
Really?
That's what they're calling it. I don't know if that's actually the truth or not, but that's what I've heard.
I have to Google that one.
Google that, and you Google that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as the EMS industry goes, there's a lot that has been affected by COVID. You know, there are EMS agencies out there all across the nation. I know Minnesota in particular, and some other states have been really hit hard by EMS shortages. And I think the Great Resignation continues, and it doesn't leave out these really, really important industries like EMS that other people or the EMS workers are finding that they can go elsewhere and make more money and have better work-life balances. And 24-hour shifts are awful, right? But I think that is going to be a continuing trend with EMS. And I think we're probably even going to see it in the nursing realm as well, if we're not already seeing it, there's going to be a huge shortage. And what exactly does that mean for the patients? Because EMS is a critical service. I mean, we really have to have it. So what does that mean when someone's having a heart attack and they call 911 and they're like, hey, dude, we're sorry, we're out of ambulances right now, but we do suggest you drive yourself to the hospital. I mean, is that something that we're even prepared for in the industry to say, how can we combat this? Like, how can we come up with a solution? How can we come up with a plan to say, yeah, we have a shortage of medics, but here's how we're going to kind of broach that and how we're going to provide care in spite of the fact that we're down on personnel.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
No, I agree. I want to hear from Ashley on the perspective of the hospital side, the nursing side, what she has seen in the last 2 years, and because I think there's definitely a mass exodus among the nursing community as well. So is it pay? So that's the thing, right? A lot of EMS are moving away from EMS because of pay and work-life balance, but you also have the nursing side that are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And the pay is much higher across the board. So is it pay?
I think some of it's pay. I think there's a lot of other things that go into it. I mean, just like from the EMS side, nursing is the same way. You have this huge exodus. Mm-hmm. And so what does that do to patient care? So, you call for an ambulance, there's none available. So you go to the ER, and then you have an ER full of, 50 patients and you have 10 nurses.
Yeah.
Or, are you really going to get the care that you need in a timely manner? No, probably not. I think there's a lot of issues there. I think pay is part of it. Mm-hmm. I think from an ER perspective, I think the number of patients and the acuity of those patients that you're having to care for is very stressful. And I think it becomes overwhelming for a lot of nurses. The other side of that, I think, we'll talk about the EMS side, but nursing implemented more travel nurses to try to combat the shortage. And we're paying those nurses a lot of money to the point that a lot of those travel nurses were making more than I do as a provider in the ER.
Wow.
And so I think from a nursing perspective, that's hard. That's a hard pill to swallow whenever you're there doing the same job and they're making 3 times the amount of money that you are. Because they chose to travel and come there for a 6-week assignment or whatever it may be.
You said it comes down to it's a hard pill to swallow when your peers are making twice the money you are doing the same job.
You can't compare apples to oranges.
Absolutely, I can.
No, you can't. I didn't compare that. That would be like me comparing.
Are we rolling?
A doctor and what I do, and they make so much more money and we do the same thing. Well, you can't compare that.
What am I comparing?
Medics to nurses.
Oh,
listen.
That's what you're comparing, and you're comparing.
Conversation the other night, did we not?
Apples to oranges.
See, I disagree.
You can.
I disagree.
It makes a good podcast. So.
Maybe in the realm of when you look at a ground paramedic and an ER nurse. But when you get into the critical care realm and you have the exact same job description and the exact same expectations and the same duties.
Well, you know what I'm going to say.
What are you going to say?
Every single paramedic needs to graduate with a degree.
I agree.
And you will get the pay and the recognition that you want and you deserve.
And I want you to say that because that's going to prompt me to jump right in, because I think that's what the industry wants.
Yeah, I think so too.
But
I mean, it's what it needs.
Who's stopping it is the fire department, a union. That's who's stopping it, because they don't want to have a requirement for their fire medics to have a degree.
This is where I'm going to turn my filter on.
I'm telling you.
I think there's more than that's stopping it.
No, that's real. That's what's stopping it from a legislature standpoint. Because there's been multiple position papers put out by multiple entities in the last 2 years on that subject to advocate for that. I mean, the IFCCP before they went to ICAPP. I hope that's not recorded.
It is.
Don't put that in there, dude.
I see a PP.
Edit that out.
Yeah, before they became ICAP, they wrote a position paper when I was on the board, and it got a lot of rave reviews and a lot of agreement. But from the state and national standpoint, it caused the IF, what is the IF
acronym? The other acronym.
Yeah, firefighter union to put out a position paper and a big article on that, right? So they're massive, and they're stopping it.
What we need to do is separate the fire department from EMS once and for all. I mean, I realize that that's where it originated, but they're two different things now.
Well, I'll tell you this, and I would never say this on the podcast, but I have felt this, and this is not a knock on you because I didn't feel like you were like that. But I would say in my career as a preceptor or an educator, I have had more difficulty getting a nurse to be the provider they need to be from an orientation standpoint than a medic. It is a harder transition. And so when I was on that Apollo Med Flight call, medical director said the same thing. Said that in his career as a medical director for flight services, it's much harder to transition a nurse to that realm. And I could not freaking believe he said that.
Yeah, but I don't know if anybody would disagree with that. I don't know how they could disagree with that. A paramedic is used to practicing independently and has since they started practicing. A nurse, for the most part, is always working under somebody else.
Yeah.
They never have to, for the most part, and it's a bad thing, but they don't have to critically think for themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's where I struggle because you get down to the nuts and bolts. Ultimately, you want providers to be able to take care of patients, right? And so that's the end result. Let's just say, does a degree make a difference?
I think it comes down to, when I say a degree, it's a standard, right? Nursing, for you to graduate with a nursing degree, you have to have met these standards. It doesn't matter what state you're in. The standards are the same across the board. That's not true with paramedics.
That's true.
And so that's where I say where the degree comes into play, right? Mm-hmm. It's not because it takes a degree to make a good clinician. It doesn't. But your program that you did in Oregon was very strict, and you've said that. You take, we won't call out any states or areas, but you take another paramedic, and whoever they had that was teaching them didn't hold them to the same standards. They did what was on the checklist, and then they came out and they got their license. Does it make you, it doesn't make you the same. But I think it comes down to, if you want to be recognized nationally as the same, you have to hold every single person to the same education and the same standards.
Where I struggle is when you do have people that have, I've said it many times. I did not. The state of Oregon's requirements to have an associate's degree caught me off guard. It was, I believe, I might have been the first class. Maybe it was the second class. Actually, I think I was the second class for the state of Oregon to ever implement that. And but I wasn't prepared for that, and it put me behind because now I had to have an associate's degree before I tested for my national registry. I did it, but I had to take 22 credit hours per quarter to do that. So that put an added burden on me, and I was upset about it at the time. But I think what I realized is it really opened my mind up to so many things, right? It gave me a really broad perspective. But going through the education, and then I got my bachelor's degree in 2013, and then I got my master's degree. The problem is when you do have people that excel from the paramedic side, you're still lumped into the masses. Now, I felt like Air Methods, when they reevaluated everything, they paid me very well, and I was very I was very grateful for that. Right, I felt recognized. I felt like I was being treated at a level I was equal to my peers, whether you were a nurse or paramedic, and I thought that was amazing. But I don't think that's across the board. And I know that there's a pay difference between a nurse and paramedic across the board. I mean, there is, right? And we have worked in the industry where you have a entry-level nurse that comes into a base, has an associate's degree, we'll say, does not have an advanced certification, and you're working with a paramedic that has, we'll say, an associate's degree and an advanced cert with 10 years flight experience, and they're still making $5 or $6 an hour more. That is not right.
Yeah.
And it's not right. And I would say that if I was a nurse, it's not right. Right? Don't put don't make the job descriptions the same, which I think is the right thing to do, right? Each discipline brings a different perspective to that aircraft or to that transport team. They're both valuable, and they both need to learn from each other. I also get it from the executive leadership standpoint, right? I hear questions all the time of, we feel like we're not paid enough. Whether that's in emails I get or whether that's in conversations. And ultimately, I would say, being in an executive leadership position, I would say that the company has everybody's best interests, right? They want to still be profitable to where they can meet the bottom line and have enough cash reserves to operate in a downturn. Think about the last couple of years. Think about all the hospitals out there right now that are in massive deficits. I mean, we're talking numbers that would blow your mind, right? And if you don't have the cash reserves set aside for those downturns, and now we have this new reimbursement problem happening across the country, especially affecting the air medical side, the time now is to really be aware that the company you're working for has to stay in business, right? They have to still operate. I love the quote by Warren Buffett is, when the tide goes out, you're going to see who's swimming naked. You guys ever heard that quote?
I haven't, but I'm disturbed. I'm also offended by that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just a great example.
But nobody asked you, so it doesn't.
Do you have the cash reserves? Do you have savings? Are you being, think about the 2008 housing market crash, right? There were a lot of people that were swimming naked, right? Overextended, and that's exactly where that quote comes from. Is, Are you ready? Right? He's sitting on a huge load of cash right now, and he, as an investor, is ready to pounce because we have a downturn, right? And that's just an example of that. And I think you can relate that to our pay. You can relate it to everything kind of ties back into economics.
Yeah, but I think that's, I don't think anybody would disagree with a flight nurse and a flight paramedic making the same wages, right? Like, I really don't. It goes back to, you've always been told you should be able to take off your name tag and switch and nobody knows who's what, right? So I don't think there's any question in that. The job descriptions are the same. I think you're talking about two different things when you're talking about compensation for medics and nurses in general. Generalized is completely different than specialized whenever we're doing the same thing. So like, I don't want those to get confused. But at the same time, it's not about who does something better, because the same goes in nursing, right? You have nurses who are very driven, who strive to make themselves better, who strive for education continuously. And then you have nurses who are there to draw their check, and they're only going to do what they have to do to make it through their shift, right? It's not any different.
No, it's the same with medics too.
It's the same.
Absolutely,
right?
the same.
And you can't, and you're going to make the same amount if you bust yourself and go above and beyond. You're going to make the same amount as the nurse who does what they have to do to get through their shift.
Yeah.
So I think that's two totally different things there. I do think you have an argument when it comes to the flight side. I do.
Now, the economic impact of that, though, I mean, you got to look at it from, if I was a business owner and all of a sudden I was going to bring parity, think about if you raised every single paramedic, we'll just say $3 an hour, to match what that nurse is making.
I see that.
That's a huge impact on the bottom line. And let me say one more thing, and then I'll let you give your thoughts, is to keep a nurse, right? Let's just think the standard nurse schedule is 3/12s, correct? Usually in most hospitals, right?
Yeah.
You have opportunity to work overtime, and I know we have a big nursing shortage, and nurses are being asked to take more patients. But you move them into a flight role from an hourly rate standpoint. Some of them might take a pay cut.
I took a pay cut.
You took a pay cut per hour.
Yeah.
But you look at it now. I look at it. Let's just throw Air Methods. I've said it many times. That base at Kentucky 8 where you and I met, that schedule, that was the best schedule I've ever worked. 8 shifts a month. It gave me opportunity. If I wanted to work overtime, I could and still have lots of time off to do whatever. So there is a payoff. Now, I'll just say it. Working 12s, 7 12s, or 4 on, 3 off, I have no desire to ever work that schedule. I know that there's a big focus on rest and big focus on that. For me personally, this does not represent, any entity I've worked for or currently work for. It's just I don't like that schedule. I think when I have worked that schedule, I was more fatigued because you work 12 hours and then you get off or you get a late flight, then you have to do your chart. You're not even home until 10 or 11 o'clock, and then you have to turn right around and come back at 7 in the morning, 6 in the morning, and you do that over again. And you're doing 12-hour shifts. Some of these aircraft are doing 5 flights in 12 hours.
Yeah.
You're getting your butt handed to you.
Yeah.
To me, that is not a quality of life. And so I would take a 24-hour shift and get killed to know that I only have to work 8 shifts a month all day long. I did it for 20 years. So I
think that's the EMS life.
Right.
From the beginning, that's what I knew was 24-hour shifts. There was no 12-hour or anything. So, and I agree with you from a fatigue standpoint. I know that after a 24-hour shift, especially when you've been run into the dirt, you're exhausted, and the next day is kind of a wash. Honestly,
it is. It's a lost day.
But during that whole day, typically for me, I rested that whole next day, and then I had another day off to do pretty much whatever I wanted to do. And then back when I was in ground EMS, it was 24 on, 48 off. So I had another day that I could do, whatever. And then once I got into flight, I think it was even another day. It was 24, 72. Mm-hmm. So I had 2 days off. So it's a great schedule. In my opinion, I agree with Eric. I'm not a big fan of the 12-hour shifts either. But I do see that a lot of EMSs or EMTs and paramedics particularly are looking at the pay that they're receiving from the ground, not even necessarily from an air medical standpoint. And they're saying, if I'm going to work as much as I'm working now, I can become a nurse and kind of do a similar job and make more money and have less time that I have to work. But when you get into the air medical industry, like they're saying, it's almost a similar role. And so I do think that there has to be some changes within the industry, both from an air medical standpoint and from a ground standpoint, in order to keep what was the word you used, parity. Mm-hmm. In order to keep parity with the roles. I would like to see EMS evolve a little bit in that, like ground EMS. I would like to see ground EMS evolve a little bit. And there are reports that some EMS agencies are paying as much as $20,000 sign-on bonus just to attract more medics to sign on, but that's not working. So is it pay? A little bit, yes. Is it time? Probably a little bit. But I think there is room from an executive level to say, how can I make this more appealing? How can I make this better? It's not just about putting warm bodies on the truck and going out and picking patients up and taking them to the hospital. It's about quality providers on the street, bringing patients the care that they need. And I think that comes down a lot to education.
Yeah. You transitioned through your career and you had an end goal in sight to be a nurse practitioner, But I don't think that was for pay, was it? Like, that wasn't your end goal. That wasn't why. No. It was the higher level of care you were providing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with pay. Because depending on what you do, you could look at it and you could say the pay is really not that great for the amount of time that you have to invest. So yeah, I think it came down to the level of care that you were able to provide for patients.
I can see that. There was a lot, even when my wife went through and got her nurse practitioner, there were so many of her peers that couldn't even find a job, because it didn't pay. They could have gone back and just become a nurse and made more money. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I see that. I see wanting to provide that higher level of care versus the pay.
Well, it's perfect because it sets us up for two topics that I wanted to talk about that are kind of hot news. And I would kind of end that last thought with, I would challenge anybody, having sat in different seats and currently sitting at a level to where I get to interact with other executives and listen to the decision-making process and the conversations and stuff like that. I would say this is that when you're a provider providing care to the patients and you don't have the perspective, sometimes our judgment or our thoughts about what is maybe happening at the corporate side is not correct, right? And I would say that I would challenge that if anybody was sitting in those seats and you were given all the same information that these men and women are receiving, I mean, and I can tell you it is so much. There is so much information that has to be looked at and evaluated and discussed, ultimately to sustain a model that they can sustain continuous business, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that 9 times out of 10, right? Nothing's ever perfect. You would agree with that same decision. You would make that same decision if you were given all the information. And what's interesting, that goes back to the whole Nash equilibrium. John Nash, the economist and Nobel Prize winner, really his thought process on game theory and that Nash equilibrium was really that exact concept, that if you have two people, two countries, two militaries given the same exact information from a strategy standpoint, they were given all the same information, they're going to make the exact same decision. So that goes back to really these other two topics, right? You talked about, we've talked about the degree requirement, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Evan, you talked about really the shortage in the industry, the mass exodus of EMS, really the paramedics. Ashley, you talked about the same thing. And then you talked about really the decision to become a nurse practitioner and why you became a nurse practitioner, and Evan, your wife as well. So I've got two topics I want to talk about. The first one is a resolution that the National Registry put out recently. And really this is resolution 13. And really, if you haven't heard this, it is a way where the National Registry has made a resolution. They've put it out. They're seeking comments right now, I believe, until August 17th. But they're putting it out to where right now, currently, to have a paramedic program in the United States, you have to have that COEMSA accreditation, and it has to be taught through a community college, minimum. It cannot be taught outside of that accreditation process. They have put out a resolution that really is saying that would be no more, that the state level could approve any paramedic program. It does not have to have the COEMSA stamp. And there is a lot of people in uproar about it. And I think the reason why they're doing that is the only thing I can hypothesize, again, thinking back to what I just said, if you were sitting at that board of directors table and why are they making that decision? What pressures are they being put under to make that decision, right? It doesn't make any sense to me. But if I was sitting in that seat, would I make that decision? Or is it a divided decision process to where it was a majority, right? I don't know. No. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I don't know either, but I think probably, sitting at that table, and we're talking about this, what is it? Great. I can't remember the word, but
Exodus?
this big
The word you said?
Yes,
Yeah.
this great resignation. Yes, Exodus. Thank you. I'm getting old. So I think when we have this, we have to make it easier for organizations, for agencies to be able to hire these paramedics, and I think through a lot of the logic behind it, or what could lead to this. And you look throughout COVID, the last 24 months that we've had, there have been people who they don't have money. They, we're facing a recession if we're not already in one. And so there's a lot of people who can't afford to go to a community college to get their education. And so I think that's why this resolution is put out. It's much like what they did with online learning, when they said it can all be online learning as long as you get your education. And so I think there's a lot of things that are being changed to make it easier for people to do what they need to do for the industry. Having said that, I don't think it's a good thing. I think that think about this. Where can you go to get certified as a welder? You can't just go to a welding shop and be like, "Hey, certify me." You can learn to weld at a welding shop, but if you want to be a certified welder, you have got to go to an accredited program in order to do that. Because ultimately, think about this. I mean, a welder, that doesn't seem like it's in the same category as EMS, right?
Yeah.
But, all right. So now I have a 3,000-pound I-beam, and I am going to weld that in a place that is above somebody's head. That a lot of people are going to walk underneath it. They're going to walk around it. And if I don't do a good job welding that beam in place, if I don't know my job, and, with these welding schools, they x-ray their welds to make sure that they're correct. Ultrasound. So they know, I mean, anybody can stick two pieces of metal together if they've got a welding, machine.
I can. My bead's not very nice.
It's okay. I've seen your bead. But, anybody can do that, but will it hold? Is it safe enough for somebody to walk under and not get crushed by a 3,000-pound beam? So that's how it really transitions over into EMS as well. Sure, you can go out and you can get taught by somebody how to be a paramedic, but do you know what you know? Are you certified to do it? Do you have somebody who's teaching you that somebody else has said, yes, they know what they're talking about. They can teach. This program meets all of our recommendations and all of our standards. And so I really think that's kind of the difference. And it still deals with people's life. It's not something that you can just take lightly. It still deals with life. So it's important.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, first thought is I was trying to tie in your 3,000
3,000-pound I-beam.
Pound beam or whatever falling, and then EMS coming in. I was trying to tie those together. But no, I honestly, I guess, let me ask the question here. Are they doing this because of the shortage, and this is an easier way for people to get through the red tape? Like, what's the idea behind this?
I would hypothesize that that's
give
why.
My opinion
it is bringing more people to be certified, because currently right now across the United States, and I might be mistaken on every state, but the entry level way of getting a state license is to have national registry. So that's the only reason why I don't let my national registry go.
Right.
I've told you I let it go one time and never do that again, is because of all the states that I've flown in. And I still have 9 state licenses, right? But if I let national registry go and I something happened and I needed to go fly in a certain state, I could not get that state license without National Registry. So that is really the gateway. And you know, I think that is one reason, is to bring more people to the profession. Or maybe the thought is that that's going to bring more people to the profession. I think you still have the pay thing though, right? Is that going to work?
No, it doesn't fix it. I do think it causes some other problems here. It goes back to, let's be honest, nursing is a profession that's been around a long time in comparison to EMS. Not saying it's better, but it does take time to build everything up. And I think going in the direction of standardized education is a way to progress EMS in general.
Yeah.
And so my concern is that you're taking a step back.
Yeah.
If you take this away and you say we're going to leave it to the state level, you have some states who are very progressive, depending on who's on that board, right? And then you have states who don't want their paramedics to do anything but take a blood pressure and just get them to the hospital. So again, I feel like you're reverting back. You're going to allow people to potentially have educations that are so far apart that you're setting yourself backwards. Like, you're trying to get to a standardized area to progress. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it from a wrong
you're
perspective.
And it goes right into really what we just talked about. We talked about the degree requirements, right? We talked about the difference between a paramedic and a nurse. And, as far as I know, there's only 2 states in the United States still. So Oregon adopted that policy. They were the first state in the country to do that, and that was in 1997. And I believe the first class was 90, 97, 98, something like that.
Were you in that class?
I was in the second class. So...
Are you trying to date him?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was in the second class. And Iowa is the other state. So you have 2 states.
2 states that what? I think I missed that.
Require... it's not Iowa, it's Kansas. Sorry, it's Kansas. That require associate's degree. It is Kansas, yeah. So Oregon, Kansas. And that's just amazing to me that we're 24 years from when that first was initiated, and I still don't understand why. I do understand why. I mean, I understand what the obstacles are. It's with anything, and I know the IFCCP, which is now ICAP, they put out a position paper probably 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when I was on the board. I had nothing to do with writing it. All the credit goes to the authors of that, but they really put out a position paper on a degree requirement for paramedics, a minimum of an associate's degree. And I think across the board, when you saw social media and you saw the feedback, I think it was positive. Where we saw really the pushback, and this is, again, no fault to, I started in the fire service. I have the utmost respect for firefighters and paramedics that work in that discipline. Love them. They're my brothers and sisters. But when you look at the union side of that, they are the ones that are pushing back, right? Yeah. They have a massive union, and they're looking at it from a cost standpoint, right? They're under the same types of financial hurdles that others are. Sure. Talking to Mike Verkest, I know he talked about that their budget 2 weeks into the 2022 year. It was there was over $1 million shortfall, something like that, and it was strictly because of property tax collections were late and down, secondary to COVID, right, and the loss of jobs, and so that ripple effect is not only affecting the private side, but also the government agencies that are run by counties and city
municipalities. There you go.
See, guys, I struggle with saying big words. That word.
It's omnious.
It is omnious. No, it's
that
omnious.
One.
And so I think that is where it comes down to is, you have to, these big unions, these large corporations, it's no different than politics, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's whoever has the most power that is going to stop things. So I think when you look at that right there, and now you take this potential initiative, I think it sets EMS back 20 years.
Oh, I agree.
And it's sad, and I pray that the conversation, the comments are overwhelming to where they do not initiate that. And as I said, if you August 17th is that deadline.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that there's a lot of things to unpack, with this. One of them is, I got an associate's degree from Eastern Kentucky University, and why did I pursue that? Why did I do it? Because I wanted to be the best of the best? No, it was because I was in school, I was in college, and I was in another degree program. I started working as an EMT, and I wanted to get my degree. And so that's why I continued. I changed majors, and I continued in that, and I got my degree. But everybody around me that I worked with that had been working for the last 10 years or so would be like, that's ridiculous. You don't need that. What does that benefit you? What does that get you? I didn't do that. I just got my paramedic at whatever, or there were even some universities. I know the University of Kentucky for several years had a certificate program for paramedics, and they may even still do that. I'm not sure, but there was never a degree requirement for it. And I think as our industry has grown and changed, there's a lot more that we do now in EMS than we did 10 years ago, because it has grown and it's expanded, and there have been so many new things. And so I don't know the best phrase to say other than I feel like that we have a responsibility to legitimize, is not the word that I want to use, but it's the only word that I can come up with, to legitimize our industry more than it was 10 years ago. I mean, several years ago, it was a hearse with a maybe an oxygen tank in the back, and whomever driving, and whomever you could get in the back to sit and crouch and make sure somebody didn't slide all over the back of that thing on your way to the hospital. And somebody at some point said, that's not enough. We have to do more. And so the industry changed and shifted. And I think that's the way it's gone for years, is somebody said, that's not enough. That's not enough. And so I guess the best word I can come up with is legitimize. And I think we've all kind of hit different aspects of that. And nursing has had a degree requirement for a long time, and I look at that as a legitimized requirement. Whereas
respiratory therapy too,
absolutely,
yeah.
Whereas the EMS industry, we've never had that. It's all been scattered. You have providers, EMS providers, who have no degree, who maybe have a certificate, or maybe they went to the local factory that there was a paramedic instructor that decided he would come in there to the factory and certify all those people, so when an arm got off or something, they knew how to stop the bleeding. But there's so many different ways, and I feel like we're saying, I feel like this is a step backwards. I think we can continue to push the industry forward, and I think we can continue to be better as an organization, and that's going to result in better patient outcomes overall, whether it's pre-hospital or whether it's transport medicine or whatever. I think as we continue to learn to grow and solidify as a community, we'll get better.
Well, and Ashley said something I think that was big, and I think we know this, is the nursing conglomerate is massive. It's powerful, right? But they're all saying the same thing. Right. They all have one voice. And as you said, the nursing industry is a couple hundred years old. EMS is 1971.
I was going to say we're about 50 now, something like that.
Yeah, so very, very early. But and maybe that will come. And if you trace back the lineage of nursing, maybe at 50 years, the industry was the same thing, and we just have to let time really advocate for these changes.
I would agree with that. And I think if you do look at nursing history, I think you see that. Obviously, they didn't have an associate's degree 200 years ago for nursing. It was probably learned and adopted and mentored and kind of grown into job shadowing or whatever you want to call it.
So why did Ashley you pick nursing instead of being a paramedic?
Because I started out pre-med, and I was young, dumb, and broke, and thought that
you wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah, I started out that route, and then because I knew everything at 18 and 19, as every 18 and 19-year-old does, I knew that 8 years minimum was a long time, and it wasn't worth it at that point. And so, looking down through there, what's the next closest thing? Well, nursing. So let's go to nursing school.
Yeah. So I wanted to unpack a few things. That's funny you said that. So, and then we can move on to this next topic. But you said something when you had made the choice to move to an associate's degree program, right? You were already in college, and really you were getting the peers that you worked around were saying, why do you need that? And I think that is a great example of, and you see it constantly, how many adult learners that maybe dropped out of high school, didn't go to college, are now in a bachelor's degree program, or right. And as you become more aware of your surroundings, or you start growing in just all the ways that we grow as an adult, you start realizing that, man, I can't promote in this position unless I have a bachelor's degree. I had 2 associate's degrees. I have 2 associate's degrees. I have a transfer associate as well, but I did not have a bachelor's degree. And it wasn't until I was promoted at Air Methods in 2013 to the educator role that degree requirement was required, right? It was, you had to have a bachelor's within 4 years.
Yeah.
Now, hindsight's 2020. They don't really enforce that. But it scared me enough to, ask Ashley. I enrolled into a program immediately, and I was able to finish that in a year and a half, and I went right into a master's program. But you can't promote, opportunities that might come before you are not going to be able to jump on those opportunities. And I think that's where you, at a younger age, right? I was forced to do an associate's degree. I would probably honestly say that if I would have had the choice at that time, I would not have done it. Now, would I have went back? Maybe. I would not have done it, right? Because I, like Ashley just said, I was financially strapped. I needed a career path.
But even if not,
yeah.
How many you ask? 18? Is that? How old were you? 19, 18, 19?
Oh, no. When I went to paramedic school, I was like 25.
Oh, were you that old?
Yeah. I made all those mistakes like in my 20s and had to work my tail off.
Who does that?
I was the Iceman.
Golly.
And I worked at Taco Bell, guys.
No.
I was a manager at Taco Bell.
You did not just work at Taco Bell.
I was a manager at Taco Bell.
Why did you decide to take a step down and get into EMS?
I've often
I love slinging some beans.
I would do it in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to offend anybody that works at Taco Bell because you provide lots.
If there's anybody out there that can hook me up with a discount, you got my email.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
I love what you make. Yeah. Keep doing what you're doing.
No, but I had wanted to be a paramedic my whole life, and it really was, but you make decisions when you're coming out of high school or at that young age, and that kind of makes you go off in another direction that you really are trying to survive, and that's really, I was in survival mode for many years. Now, I did become a volunteer firefighter at 17, almost 18 years old, and did the EMT basic, and so I started that, but I never worked as a paid personnel, right? Mm-hmm. It was early in those years. It was it was there. It was on my radar, but I financially couldn't afford it. I could not. I didn't have the means. I mean, I literally had to work, 7 days a week sometimes just to survive. So, I've never been afraid of that hard work. But
that if you were given the choice, you would not have done it. But I don't.
Because of my perspective, I had tunnel vision.
Right, but I think that's the same of most people. If you ask them, right, it's a path of you have to work twice as hard to get to the end result, or take some classes and you'll get to the same. Like, who's going to choose? There will be some that choose that. I know that. I'm not singling everybody out. For the most part at that age, you're going to choose the easiest route to get to the same endpoint. Right? Like who? Absolutely. I mean, I guess
my end point was I wanted to work as a paramedic. That was what I wanted.
Right.
And I was in a very hard program. I've talked about it. Leslie Huntington was amazing, but her expectations were very high, and the program was very high in patho. And I'll tell you, I had no problems in the program. What made the program hard was I had to do chemistry and biology and 3 quarters of A&P, and that's a lot on top of paramedic school and clinicals and ride time and things like that. It made it much more difficult for me. Yeah. But I think it also, in hindsight, it made me a stronger person. It made me me a better version of myself. But honestly, no, I would not have chose that route. Yeah. You did choose that. Kentucky is not a degree required state. And there's, Eastern Kentucky University is a great program, and it's known for their paramedic program. And, I think that's one thing. Being required to do it is one thing. You chose to do it because you felt like you must have saw, again, like Ashley just said, some of you might skip that. Most of us probably would, but there are some that would jump in that, and you were one of those.
I wanted a degree. That's why I did it. I wanted the degree. Did I feel like that made me better than a paramedic that didn't have one? No, I wanted the degree, but I'm glad that I did, because now, you can't be anything almost without a degree. Like if you want to clean parking lots, you need a bachelor's degree to do that. So, and that, I think that's a result of many things, but I do think COVID, after COVID hit, over the last 24 months, I have seen a huge uptick in degree requirements for jobs, and I think it's a result of everybody kind of moving and shuffling around. And
but you said, I think you make an interesting point, is that it doesn't make you necessarily a better paramedic.
That's interesting.
Right?
You're going to say this,
in that having a bachelor's degree coming out and going into nursing did not prepare me nor make me a good nurse whatsoever. Right. Let's just be honest about it. You didn't learn that until you got on the job and you screwed up and you learned from everybody around you, right? However, I would argue that having a degree maybe is not so much about being a paramedic or a nurse or whatever you get a degree for, but it's about you growing as a person individually. And it's being exposed to everything else that's out there, especially like most people who live in this small little bubble within their community, and they don't get out of that bubble. I do think it allows you to grow as a person and have a better understanding for others and the world around you. And I think there's something to be said for that.
This has been a production of the FlightBridgeED Podcast, leading the way in pre-hospital critical care and emergency medicine education.